After 1989's Godzilla vs. Biollante underperformed at the Japanese box office, Toho wanted something simpler and flashier, so the studio execs decided that the next entry needed a classic, recognizable monster and a high-concept hook. Initially, a King Kong vs. Godzilla remake was briefly discussed, but Toho couldn't afford Kong's rights, so they revived King Ghidorah instead. Writer-director Kazuki Ōmori returned, blending Ghidorah's comeback with a time travel plot that was inspired by Back to the Future and The Terminator. Pre-production began in early 1981, with many of Biollante's crew returning. The biggest draw, though, was composer Akira Ifukube, scoring his first Godzilla film since 1975. His music, paired with Koichi Kawakita's ambitious effects work, helped merge the old with the new. Kawakita's team built an enormous King Ghidorah suit with 3 mechanized heads and 16 suspension wires operated by 9 puppeteers. Meanwhile, the Mecha-King Ghidorah finale used a separate fiberglass prop, suspended like a marionette. Godzilla's suit was worn by veteran Kenpachiro Satsuma, while miniature sets recreated Tokyo and Sapporo in elaborate detail, which, of course, Godzilla and Ghidorah memorably demolish. Released in Japan on December 14th, 1991, the film drew 2.7 million viewers, nearly triple that of Godzilla vs. Biollante. It even won a Special Technology Award at the Japanese Academy Awards. Critics praised the music and the effects, but they found the story to be very convoluted and confusing. Western coverage, however, fixated on the World War II flashback where we see Japanese soldiers and a pre-mutated Godzillasaurus fighting off American GIs in World War II. It's rather gratuitous, and you see these American soldiers get absolutely wrecked by the Godzillasaurus. As triumphant music swells and the soldiers salute the creature, critics accuse the film of glorifying Imperial Japan. This controversy was so bad in America that there were literally calls and petitions to ban the film in the country because it was in pretty poor taste.
For an American, what is particularly troubling about this film is the quite apparent anti-American sentiment. To summarize the story briefly, time travelers from the 23rd century come back to present-day Japan in order to eventually destroy the country economically.
Teleportation. Start.
All these time travelers, most of the time travelers happen to be white. Most of them speak with an American accent.
Some even went as far as calling it outright propaganda. I think there's a tiny bit of merit to that. In an interview with David Milner, Ishiro Honda, the director of the original 1954 Godzilla film, was asked about this extremely controversial moment, and he said the following, quote, "Kazuki Ōmori went a little too far. He doesn't blame the soldiers, but I feel that he goes too far." However, Kazuki Ōmori denied any nationalist intent, saying the story warned against Japan's own arrogance as opposed to glorifying its past.
Director Kazuki Ōmori says this appeal to the Japanese survival instinct is not meant to be anti-American.
The movie is not especially anti-US. I just thought I'd try to picture the identity of the Japanese people.
But this ultimately begs the question, is this pro-imperialist Japanese propaganda? First, let's define what propaganda actually is. By definition, propaganda is a deliberate and systematic attempt to shape perception and behavior to serve a political goal. Propaganda does require intent, coordination, and a clear message designed to influence audiences beyond the story itself. The film was made during Japan's economic peak, when Western media often warned of a looming Japanese century. Anxiety about trade friction, automation, and Japan's corporate might bled into popular culture. You know how we think about China nowadays here in the States? That was Japan back then. In that 1990s atmosphere, Kazuki Ōmori's story imagines time travelers from the 23rd century claiming Japan will economically dominate the world unless its post-war rise is stopped. They are the villains, and that premise turns real-world American paranoia into narrative form. It's as though the movie internalizes Western fears of Japanese supremacy, exaggerates them, and then plays them back as pulpy sci-fi. The key idea, though, is national destiny. The film suggests this idea that Japan's prosperity stemmed from both its suffering in war and its ability to rebuild, but it never articulates pride in that prosperity. It treats it as something to be feared by outsiders and to be questioned by Japan itself. Sure, on the surface, this movie comes off as being about how Japan was ravaged by the evil Americans, and then it was able to succeed based solely on their grit and resilience. However, if you actually watch the movie, something I don't think the pearl clutchers in America actually did, you'll notice that the film's tone oscillates between admiration for Japanese resilience and extreme discomfort with what that power represents. That ambivalence is what keeps the film from being cleanly pro-nationalist. The problem, though, is the film's execution. It undermines its subtext. The scene's music and framing feel triumphant when they should feel tragic and ambiguous. There's never any tonal guide for the audience. You don't get an indication that the filmmakers wanted us to read the moment with irony. As a result, it looks a lot like propaganda, even when it really isn't. The film's ambition to tackle history, identity, and national trauma collides with the screenplay. It lacks all nuance. What could have been a very powerful commentary on the burden of progress instead comes off as awkward myth-making. Looking specifically at the scene itself, the Japanese soldiers' courage and the Godzillasaurus' defense serve as symbolic birth pangs of post-war Japan's might, when the creature later mutates into Godzilla, destroying the same soldier's city decades later. It ultimately closes a loop. Japan's power, born from its wartime trauma, has now turned destructive. The scene is sentimental towards the soldiers, yes, but it's also tragic toward what follows from them. The salute, the swelling music, they are heroic, but Ōmori uses Shindo's later death at Godzilla's hands to reframe that moment as being ironic. He saluted what he thought was his savior. Decades later, that same savior kills him because he didn't actually understand the situation. The film's own structure denies nationalist fulfillment. It's quite literally the thesis of who Godzilla is. That entire controversial subplot of the film brings me right back to the Blue Oyster Cult song with the line, "History shows again and again how nature points out the folly of men." Despite all of that, though, this nothing burger controversy kept Toho cautious about an overseas release. The film didn't reach the US officially until Columbia TriStar's 1998 VHS pairing with Godzilla vs. Mothra. By then, the political debate had completely faded, and we were left with a rather bizarre Godzilla movie. To me, I remember watching this movie as a kid and finding the majority of it to be rather boring, but I think a lot of that has to do with how I actually watched the movie and not the movie itself. You see, I didn't own this on VHS or DVD. Instead, I streamed it on Crackle. Now, I'm sure you're thinking,
"Oh, whoop-de-doo, everybody streams movies now, dumbass."
But this was 12 years ago, in 2013. Streaming wasn't really the standard back then. Hell, it wasn't even normalized for a lot of people. I remember when I told my parents that there were Godzilla movies on the internet that you could watch for free. They were terrified. They thought I was on some piracy site and that I had infected the family computer with malware. But that wasn't the case. Crackle is defunct now, but I used to use that site all the time back in the day since they had a good chunk of the 90s and 2000s Godzilla movies. In HD no less. The only downside was the ad breaks. At times, you would get commercials every 10 minutes or so, and they would last around 5 minutes. As a result, the viewing experience wasn't the best. You didn't have to pay to use Crackle, at least at that point. It was just watch it for free, kind of like Tubi. But I'm convinced that it literally broke my brain and made me incapable of having a streaming service with ads on it. Nowadays, I'm subscribed to HBO Max, Paramount Plus, and I even have YouTube Premium, all of which I don't have ads on because frankly, it's unbearable for me. I can't watch a movie with ads. I think this attitude was completely shaped by me watching Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah on Crackle and having to spend double the time staring at a computer screen because the ads were so constant and so frequent. Okay, weird boomer unk status rant about old defunct streaming services aside, I actually only saw this movie maybe once or twice growing up because I didn't want to have to sit through constant ads. So I didn't really own it on physical media until about 2 or 3 years ago. As a result, I really don't have the same emotional and nostalgic connection to this movie that I normally would otherwise with films like Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla or Godzilla vs. Destroya. I did have a Bandai King Ghidorah toy that was modeled after his appearance in this movie, but that's really the only connection I have to this film. Regardless, I do remember there being some fantastic special effects and some really bizarre storytelling choices in the sci-fi department. Without wasting any more of your time, this is 1991's Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah. In 1992, time travelers from the future arrive in Japan, claiming Godzilla will soon destroy the nation. They travel to World War II-era Lagos Island, teleporting a dinosaur before it can mutate into Godzilla. But they secretly leave behind creatures called Dorats, which later transform into King Ghidorah. When Ghidorah attacks Japan, a new Godzilla emerges from nuclear radiation to confront him. The monsters battle across Hokkaido and Tokyo, leaving cities in ruin. Godzilla kills Ghidorah, but in the future, Ghidorah is resurrected as the cybernetic Mecha-King Ghidorah, and returns to the past to fight Godzilla once more. Their clash devastates Tokyo, and both monsters plunge into the ocean. Beneath the waves, Godzilla stirs within the wreckage, alive and roaring once again. Right from its opening moments, Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah positions itself as a safer and more traditional entry in the Heisei era. The film begins with the iconic Toho logos underscored by Akira Ifukube's familiar march, signaling a conscious retreat to the comfort of legacy as opposed to experimentation. That single musical choice speaks volumes about the creative philosophy driving the entire project. After Biollante bombed, Toho clearly wanted a more conventional crowd pleaser, something recognizable and bankable. Where Return of Godzilla and Godzilla vs. Biollante sought to modernize the franchise through darker tones and biological horror, Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah shifts gears into nostalgia, reprising the same musical and thematic beats that audiences first heard all the way back in the 1960s. Don't get me wrong, I love Ifukube's work, it's iconic for a reason, but the sonic palette here feels cautious. Gone are the experimental flourishes like Biowars, replaced instead by orchestrations that could have underscored something like Destroy All Monsters. This new era of Godzilla had all the potential in the world to reinvent Godzilla for a new generation, but this film chooses to preserve as opposed to challenge. It's a creative comfort zone masked as a triumphant return. Even with that critique, my Neanderthal caveman inner kaiju-loving brain can't deny how thrilling it is to see King Ghidorah return in all of his golden glory. No matter how safe the story feels, the craftsmanship behind the practical effects are extraordinary. Ghidorah has never looked better, or more intimidating. Each head feels alive, constantly writhing and reacting with unsettling independence, giving the illusion that this three-headed beast truly exists in the same physical space as Godzilla. His sheer size and presence dominate the screen, whether he's gliding through the clouds or towering over a miniature cityscape. The visual effects team pushed the suitmation craft to its technical peak, and it shows. Later, when Mecha-King Ghidorah enters the picture, the spectacle reaches another level entirely. The metallic wings, the blinking lights, the controlled chaos, it's everything you'd want out of early 90s tokusatsu excess done right. Even the secondary designs carry a strange charm. The Godzillasaurus, while a little awkward conceptually, fits neatly into the film's mix of pulp and science fiction. It's like Jurassic Park before Jurassic Park. And then there are the Dorats, those ugly but adorable, never-ending story-looking motherfuckers whose cuteness is so out of place that it circles back around to being fascinating. Every monster in this movie feels distinct in tone and texture, and the cinematography treats them with a sense of scale that's still impressive to this day. The low-angle shots in particular sell their size better than most entries before it. Miniatures crumble with weight, and explosions feel dense, and the illusion of enormity rarely falters. The destruction sequences are staged with very deliberate framing and movement, showing a level of precision that few other Godzilla movies match from this era. The battles themselves balance physical engagement with the emerging beam era of kaiju combat. Among Godzilla fans, this period is often criticized for its reliance on static energy exchanges. Two monsters locked in place, blasting neon breath beams at each other. That criticism isn't entirely misplaced, but King Ghidorah manages to avoid the worst of it. There's enough movement and grappling and tactile interaction to keep the fights dynamic, at least for now. Godzilla and Ghidorah feel like they are actually colliding and not just statically posing across a valley. You can feel the sense of physical strain of the superformers moving through these thick costumes and these smoke-filled sets, grounding even the most fantastical moments in reality. It feels so real and so gorgeous. Later entries in the Heisei series would lean heavier into the beam-centric combat, but this film maintains an effective midpoint. Spectacle rooted in craftsmanship as opposed to spectacle for its own sake. Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah also experiments with one of the strangest and most ambitious story devices ever attempted in the franchise: time travel.
Great Scott!
Large portions of the narrative are told non-linearly, jumping between decades, even centuries, altering the continuity of events. There's an almost comic book quality to it. One of the standout moments comes when one of the characters is handed a book that he hasn't written yet. He flips through the pages, bewildered, and mutters something along the lines of, "I haven't even started writing this yet."
This is my book. I mean, it's a book I'm gonna write in the future.
It's a surreal moment that teases a movie about causality and fate. It's the kind of high-concept storytelling that you rarely see in a Godzilla movie. Flashbacks to World War II and forward jumps into alternate futures add layers of intrigue, and on paper, it's an incredible idea since it's a story that uses time travel to recontextualize Godzilla's existence and Japan's national identity. But in execution, the film loses control of its own logic, and ultimately, it shits the bed. The problem is the complete lack of structure. The film never clarifies the rules of its own time travel. Characters will alter the past, yet the present remains largely unchanged. Godzilla is erased from history and then reappears without explanation. Cause and effect exist when convenient and disappear when they complicate the story.
Godzilla is no longer with us anymore. And it seems like somehow, out of nowhere, this King Ghidorah has appeared.
Much, much later.
What's going on? SOS! We're in trouble!
Now, I don't expect an elaborate web of logic like Primer or 12 Monkeys, but even the most outlandish premise needs boundaries. Without those, every scene contradicts the one before it. The film wants the emotional weight of a sci-fi tragedy, but it plays out like a messy anthology, stitched together from half-baked ideas. It's full of fascinating concepts like temporal paradoxes, alternate histories, and speculative technology, but they collapse under the weight of inconsistent writing. You can almost feel the production rushing to meet a release date instead of refining the screenplay. The result is a film that promises a bold reimagining of a franchise, but ends up tangled in its own contradictions. What makes this so frustrating is that the story didn't need to be this convoluted. A simpler premise could have carried the same weight. King Ghidorah is this intergalactic destroyer, arrives on Earth to annihilate humanity, and Godzilla has to fight him. That's all this movie could have been. It's all it really should have been. That setup is timeless. Instead, we get a strange blend of time travel, recycled Hollywood tropes, and meandering subplots. The film borrows very liberally from The Terminator, Back to the Future, Aliens. I don't know what they're doing here. It never develops its own identity. The pacing feels erratic, the emotional beats fall flat because the foundation is built on contradictions. It's clear there were some strong creative instincts behind the concept, but the execution feels like a first draft that no one had time to polish. Beneath the chaos lies a genuinely intriguing idea, though. A commentary on how Japan's past and future collide through Godzilla's legacy, but the writing never gives it room to breathe. It's so frustrating. But getting back to the positives, something I love about this movie, though, is the production design. The film radiates early 90s energy in every conceivable way, from the fashion, to the sets, to the over-designed and under-designed technology. It tries to be futuristic while still rooted in the analog world. It sits at this fascinating crossroads where the film design hadn't yet fully embraced the digital era, creating this kind of proto-retro futurism. You see characters using clunky CRT monitors alongside holographic displays and sleek metallic interiors that look straight out of a sci-fi serial. The film feels like a time capsule that somehow predicted its own obsolescence. Shindo's office stands out as one of the best sets in the entire series. I love the dinosaur maquettes and the half-finished sculptures that give you an immediate sense of who Shindo is without him having to even say a word. The space feels like a physical manifestation of nostalgia, connecting his past fascination with dinosaurs to his literal encounter with one on Lagos Island. Every environment in the film has that level of care. No corner feels sterile, no wall feels empty. There's always something to look at. The Heisei era has always prided itself on strong visual presentation, but this entry takes it further by fully embracing the pop aesthetics of its time. The film's time machine is another example of how design and nostalgia intertwine in this movie. Its circular shape and glowing panels immediately evoke the Exilian UFO from Invasion of Astro Monster. Whether that was intentional or not, it is just a UFO design. It creates a bridge between eras. I mean, both stories follow a very similar narrative rhythm. Outsiders arrive under the guise of cooperation, offer Earth a promise of progress, and ultimately reveal their ulterior motives. In that way, Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah functions almost like a remake of Astro Monster, but filtered through the aesthetics of, Star Trek The Next Generation. The parallels are uncanny, the clean metallic corridors, the minimalist furniture, and it's like, fuck yeah, go Godzilla. Take from Star Trek, because Star Trek kinda sorta took from you. Astro Monster came out before Star Trek after all, and that movie feels very Star Trek, so it's like, go ahead, take from Next Generation. Who cares?
Incredible.
The influence of Western pop culture is everywhere in this movie. These are Japanese filmmakers channeling American futurism through a distinctly Toho lens. The Futurians themselves are some of the most fascinating human villains in the series. They aren't cartoonishly evil alien invaders. Instead, they're ideological manipulators who use history as a weapon. Their motivation centers around reshaping Japan's destiny, punishing it for its economic dominance, and rewriting the future in their favor. That premise really allows the film to briefly explore themes of nationalism, guilt, and the cyclical nature of power. The characters' motives echo that anxiety of early 90s Japan, when global discourse painted the country as this unstoppable financial superpower. But much like the World War II scenes, the problem is that the screenplay doesn't know how to balance tone. The story moves from that economic allegory to absurdist pulp without any warning, and the Futurians' dialogue swings between insightful and unintentionally hilarious.
Men of your time would call our ship a time machine, but not us. We call it our mothership.
So, this ship is a time machine.
Still, their presence gives the film an identity beyond simple monster spectacle. By this point in the series, the human technology has escalated from grounded realism to complete absurdity, and King Ghidorah fully embraces that shift. We go from the sober tone of Return of Godzilla, where we have the Super X, but now, 2 movies later, there's an android sprinting at supersonic speeds and casually surviving explosions. The tonal jump is enormous, but it works because the film commits to that absurdity. It treats every ridiculous concept, like androids and teleportation and psychic powers, as if it belongs in the same world, and that commitment makes it feel oddly cohesive in a really weird way. The movie never apologizes for its spectacle, and that makes it fun. It's pure Saturday morning science fiction energy with the budget and craftsmanship of a Godzilla blockbuster. Even the human scenes, which are often the weakest element in Godzilla films, have a lot of charm here. There's an unintentional hilarity in how stiff some of the performances are, especially from the English-speaking actors. But it's that awkwardness that adds to the film's personality.
Did you really think you'd be able to get away with what you were doing? We knew you were going to visit your friend.
There's a really great scene where an American soldier sees the time machine fly overhead during World War II, and he says to the other soldier, "Hey, you could tell your son about it when he's born, Private Spielberg."
Shall we report it, sir?
What, that we're being invaded by little green men from outer space? Let's just keep it as our secret. You can tell your son about it when he's born. Major Spielberg?
It's so stupid, it's so ridiculous, but it gives the movie this self-aware wink that feels strangely affectionate. Mickey continues to be the emotional anchor of the series, and this installment cements her as one of its strongest recurring characters. However, it is a shame how she is so compelling, but is stuck being a background character. Mind you, the main cast is really interesting here, but later down the line in future films, it gets really aggravating when you're forced to follow characters that are just mind-numbingly boring, while Mickey is forced to be relegated to set dressing. It's a damn shame, but we are not there yet. M11, the Futurian android, adds levity every time he's on screen. He looks like Jeff Daniels from Dumb and Dumber, but he runs like Ezra Miller in The Flash. He's so committed to his role that it's impossible not to enjoy every scene he's in. Throughout the film, it's very easy to feel like Godzilla himself barely appears, but his actual screen time, around 15 minutes, is fairly standard for the series. What matters is how that time is used. Each appearance feels grand, but it's spread across way too much. The destruction scenes are very long and deliberate, with the camera framing him like a living natural disaster. I'll always prefer that approach over the endless boardroom scenes or newscasts describing what he's doing off-screen. The pacing might be very rough at points, but when the monsters show up, the movie delivers. At the end of the day, Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah is a very, very, very strange hybrid of tones and influences. It's visually rich, thematically ambitious, and narratively chaotic, but it ultimately falls apart in its execution. The film feels halfway between a Japanese kaiju epic and a Western sci-fi blockbuster. You can see fragments of countless American movies. There's even a direct nod to Dirty Harry with the line, "Go ahead, make my day."
Go ahead, make my day.
It's a bizarre stew of cultural crossovers that somehow form a coherent flavor. The writing is a clusterfuck, but the direction and production design give it an undeniable charm. It's an imperfect movie that looks incredible, moves with confidence, and captures the exact kind of creative insanity that defines why the Heisei era still fascinates people today. And with all that out of the way, I'm Cole McCormick. You are watching Firewood Media. This is part 20 of my massive Godzilla retrospective project, where I revisit and review every single Godzilla movie and TV show. As a bit of a channel update, I want you guys to know that I am fully committed to working on getting these retrospectives out as soon as humanly possible. I'm basically shelving every other project that I'm working on right now to get these videos done so that we can finish out the 90s era of Godzilla before the end of January 2026. After that, I really want to get into covering Ultraman and doing deep dives into a lot of the shows and the movies in that franchise. But right now the goal is to finish first Gamera and then the 90s Godzilla retrospectives. As a result, that means that I'm not going to be posting as much, and I'm going to be focused solely on getting this project done. That's why you haven't seen a lot of uploads, and it's been mainly one video a week. I'm trying to sort of compensate by giving you guys YouTube Shorts as much as possible, but for now, this is what it's going to be for the foreseeable future, at least until January. Huge thank you to our channel members for supporting the channel. Your names are listed right here on screen. It's $1.99 a month. You can get early access to all my videos, plus exclusive members-only content, and even see your name featured in the credits of our original films and videos just like these. It's an easy way to help keep these retrospectives and short films going, but whether you join or not, I appreciate you watching. Consider subscribing. I really want to hit 50k subs by Christmas. That would be incredible. We're almost there. Thank you for sticking with me, and I will see you in the next one. Peace out.